All right. Hello, everyone. So the topic of the talk is a ticket worth waiting 65 years for. Some people may have seen this talk or a variant of this talk before because I use the same title, that's it. But what we're going to talk about today is this. So some people know about Active Directory stuff. We're going to deep dive into AD stuff and especially tickets, Kerberos tickets. And in that, we'll just remind ourselves what is silver ticket, golden ticket, and the diamond ticket for those who don't know what it is. We'll talk about S4U to self and U to U, which are extensions and authentication protocols in Kerberos. And then we'll talk about the sapphire ticket, which is the most complex variant of the golden ticket. We'll also talk about something a bit new, which is the implications of a patch made by Microsoft a few months ago, a year ago, I think, which is KB 58380. And we'll see what implications there are against the Sapphire ticket. For the people who would like to take pictures or get the slides, you'll have a link on the bottom right corner of the slides, which is shutdown.page.link/MCTTP23. So this is me. Some people may know me from the Hacker Recipes, where I just put a lot of stuff, theoretical and practical guides, and others via Exegol. And the few that don't know me, you must know because I'm a meme expert. I like tweeting stuff and shitty stuff. And so if you want to ask questions or just want an inspiration from memes, here you go. So first thing first, by show of hands, who is handling Active Directory stuff on a daily basis? All right, a few people. Don't be shy. Active Directory stuff. So a few people here will just remind a few things, a few requirements to understand the later attacks. Active Directory, usually it's a set of services. When we talk about Active Directory, we usually refer to Active Directory Domain Services, ADDS, but it's not the only kind of services there are in Active Directory. We also find certificate services, site services, federation services, and they all come together in a nice package called Active Directory. What it's used for, it's pretty simple. You'll find computers, groups, users, resources, and Active Directory just makes it easy to handle all of that and make sure that everyone just talks with each other perfectly. In Active Directory, in order to allow a resource, a user, a principal to access a resource, you have something called authentication protocols. The two most common authentication protocols are NTLM and Kerberos. Who, by show of hands, know the main differences between NTLM and Kerberos? All right, a few people. So we'll just remind a few things. NTLM works in a three-way handshake. You just have the client asking for a few information to the server. Server gives back a challenge. Client gives back an encrypted thing. And that's it, authenticating. And Kerberos works with tickets. And some people think that, I included, that Kerberos is more secure than NTLM in many ways. This is true, but what you have to keep in mind, though, is it's not perfect. In this diagram, in this mind map, I showed the attacks that you can have. The attacks are in yellow rectangles, and you'll find that there are two rectangles on the top part of the mind map, which is the NTLM part, and on the bottom part, it's Kerberos stuff. And you'll find much more yellow rectangles, meaning that you'll find much more diverse attacks. Doesn't mean that Kerberos is weaker than NTLM. It just shows that there are many attacks, and many people think that Kerberos is more secure and just leave it that way without configuring anything. That is wrong. You have to disable NTLM, that's true, but you also have to configure Kerberos the proper way. Kerberos works basically like this. You have a user that wants to access a final resource. He asks for something called a TGT, a ticket granting ticket, and once he has that first ticket, he can obtain another one called the service ticket. And this service ticket is the second and last one, the most important one to access the final service. One thing you have to remember is that it's not a two-step operation, it's three steps actually. You have to obtain the TGT, you have to obtain the ST, but before obtaining the TGT, in that same process, you have something called the pre-authentication. And in that pre-authentication, you have to show that you have the knowledge of your password. And this is the pre-authentication, you have to show that you know the account's long-term key. So usually it's a Kerberos key, and it's something like AES 128, 256, RC4, etc. And just heads up, when we talk about overpass the hash, it's exactly this. It's pass the hash for NTLM, but for Kerberos, you use the RC4 long-term key, just like you use the NT hash for NTLM to pass the hash. Now, there's something you must keep in mind. You can just forget what I said earlier if you don't want to keep the details in mind, but this is something you have to keep in mind. The main differences between the TGT and the service ticket. So the TGT allows to get service tickets, and the service ticket allows to have access to the services. The tickets are basically the same thing. They have the same structure, but you'll find in the TGT that the target service is KRB TGT. It's always the same one. And in the service ticket, the target service name is the service. In the first TGT, the target service being KRB TGT, the pack, which contains all the sensitive information about the user that wants to authenticate to the target service, is the pack is protected with the target service long-term key. So in this case, it's the KRB TGT password, the KRB TGT long-term key. And for a service ticket, it's also protected with the target service long-term key. It has the same structure. It's not the same encryption key, if you mind, but it's the same thing. It's the same structure. So now, how can we, now that we understood the structure of those tickets, forge ourselves tickets to either escalate privileges or, in most cases, have a persistent access? The first ticket that comes to mind usually is the golden ticket, but I'll come to that later on. The first one I'll talk about is the silver ticket. Silver ticket is basically you have to forge a ticket for a target service. Not a TGT, you have to forge a service ticket. So silver service, you can remember this. What we know when we want to forge a silver ticket is the target service long-term key. As I said before, the service ticket contains a pack. This pack contains all the sensitive information about the user. And if in that pack we can say that we are indeed a domain admin, for example, we win. We cannot do that if we don't know the target service long-term key. That's the basic silver ticket knowledge. So what we build is a forged pack. We just say, I am user administrator with that ID, with that SID in that domain, with these groups, etc., etc. You have to forge everything from the start, from scratch. And you build a ticket targeting a service, a target service. So it's a bit limited because you don't have a TGT allowing you to obtain more tickets, but you could be able to access the target service. So in this case, for example, there is something called the NTLM1 to silver ticket attack or something. The silver ticket can be used in an escalation of privileges attack. That's one of the exceptions. It basically works like this. I'm going to do everything in Python. So using Impacket, I can just find the SID of the domain, which is one of the arguments that is needed in the later command, and ticketer allows to forge the ticket. And that's how you build a silver ticket. If I try to describe this ticket and see how it's structured, you can see that the target service here is host/svo1.domain.local. It's a target service. If I go inside the ticket, inside the pack, you can see that the user error ID is 500, which usually refers to the domain administrator. And that's your silver ticket. It cannot be used to dump everything and connect as an admin to any service because you only have one service ticket to one service. And that's the thing in the bottom of the screen. You just dump credentials from remotely from a target service. Golden tickets, pretty much the same thing. But instead of targeting one specific service, you target KRB TGT, allowing you to have a TGT, allowing you to request more service tickets. That's usually golden because you can access anything, have a persistent access, and that's how it works. It works the same way. You have to know the long-term key of the KRB TGT. That's the golden ticket. Same problem as with silver tickets. You have to forge everything from scratch. You have to forge your pack, know your values, and if something mismatches, and you can be detected. And that's usually how a golden ticket can be detected. There is also another way to detect golden ticket usage or forgery, is a golden ticket was used to ask for service ticket, but it was never given by the domain controller in the first place. There was no request. And that's how diamond tickets come into play, and we'll see that later. It works the same way as the silver ticket. You have to find the SID of your domain, use the KRBTGT long-term key to forge your ticket, and that's it. You have a ticket targeting KRBTGT/domain.local. That's a TGT. In the pack, you'll find the same information, the groups, the user flags, the user header ID, same thing. And then you can see that you can use this TGT to obtain access to any kind of service, usually. One thing to keep in mind, for example, if your golden ticket doesn't work, it's probably because you have a local ACL that prevents domain administrator from accessing the service. I've seen it a couple times, it's possible, but then you'll just have to forge a golden ticket, not for the domain admin, but for someone else. Then we have something else that I won't go into much details. It's called MS14068. In the family of forged tickets, you have silver, golden, diamond, sapphire, and also this one. It's a bit old. I won't go into the details, but if you want, you just have the slides. You can read what it's like. I made a diagram, the commands, everything. And there is a page on the hacker recipes that explains what it is. If you have questions, I could try to answer them, but I won't go into the details of this attack. Then we have the diamond ticket, and we will see that the diamond ticket answers a few limitations of the golden ticket. So what were the limitations of the golden ticket? You can be detected easily because you probably forged a pack with the wrong values. And that's where diamond ticket comes into play, not because you will still forge a pack from scratch, but you will have a ticket that comes after a request. So if there was an attempt to detect this, you bypass that. So what we know is the same thing as for the golden ticket. You have the same requirements. You have to know the KRBTGT long-term key, but you also need to have active credentials on the domain. And how diamond ticket works is the user that you have the credentials for asks for a TGT. The KDC answers to the user with the TGT, and then what you do, the attacker, is take that ticket, which is legitimate, just remove the pack, and instead replace that pack with your own forged one. The problem is that you have to forge the pack manually with your own values, and if you mess something up and there is a mismatch, you will still be probably detected. It's better than the golden ticket, but one thing, you need active credentials, and second, you will be detected if your pack doesn't match, probably. So the diamond ticket is like an evolution of the golden ticket, but there's still room for error in the pack. In order to use that, in order to forge that, you can still use ticketer from Impacket. The only thing is that you have to add a few arguments. The first one, in order to specify that mode, that active mode, is the -request argument. It says that indeed you will give active credentials to the domain, and you will request a legitimate ticket in which you will replace the pack. And then you give the active credentials in the same command. And here, for example, I don't know if we can read it here, but yes, in the first line of the output by ticketer, you can see that it's requesting a TGT to the target domain to use as the basis, as the ticket basis. And then it's customizing this ticket with a fully forged pack. Then you can use the ticket as a regular golden ticket. There is one limit to the diamond ticket, is here, the pack is fully forged, as I said, so there's room for error. But that's where Sapphire ticket comes into play. But before talking about Sapphire ticket, there's two things we must understand. The first one is S for you to self, and the other one is you to you. By a show of hands earlier, I've seen few people raise their hands because they were working with Active Directory. I think we'll have fewer people now, but by a show of hands, who has seen, read, heard about S for you to self? No one? One, maybe, not two, one. And you to you? Still one. All right. So I will try to explain shortly how it works, because it's a bit of a complex mechanisms, but we need to understand that before going further. S service for user, S for U, is a set of two extensions, S for U to self and S for U to proxy. Those extensions were developed by Microsoft in order to customize a bit the Kerberos delegations mechanisms they had. Unconstrained delegation was part, I think, of the Kerberos MIT project, but Microsoft added on top of that constraint delegation and resource-based constraint delegation, and they rely on S for U to self and proxy. Basically, what it does is S for U to self is you request a ticket for someone else to yourself. So, for example, I, Bob, want to have a ticket for myself, for Bob. I want to authenticate to Bob. That's a bit weird, but it works. As someone else, as a domain admin, for example. And it is legitimate shit. As for the proxy, it's basically the same thing, but instead of having a ticket for yourself, you have a ticket for another service. And that's where Kerberos delegation comes into play. If you can have a ticket as someone else to another service, you can just impersonate someone. And that's how S4 proxy works. There are restrictions, of course, on how you can use S4 proxy and obtain a ticket, but basically, you don't necessarily have to remember S4 proxy, you can just remember S4 self. Obtain a ticket for myself as someone else. And then there is another thing called user to user. So for the people who work with Kerberos, you probably know that in order to obtain a service ticket, the target service must have an SPN, right? No, it's not right. You can use user-to-user authentication and obtain a ticket not for a service, but for a user. That's a bit weird, but it works. It's you to you. And what here I just made a diagram explaining how you to you works, but basically we just have to remember that myself, Bob, can obtain a ticket as myself, Bob, to another user, Alice, for example. That's possible. And if you combine those two mechanisms, you can have a ticket as someone else to yourself, even if you're a user. And combining those two mechanisms allows you to obtain the pack of someone else. Because obtaining a ticket from someone else to yourself allows you to decrypt the ticket, obtain the pack, and in the pack you will find all the necessary information about a privileged user, for example. So that's S for yourself plus U to you. And S for yourself plus U to you can be used in other attacks rather than Sapphire ticket, like unpack the hash and RBCD without an SPN. But in the Sapphire ticket technique, we have just one thing that we need in order to bypass the pack mismatch is if we can have the pack of a privileged administrator, for example, we can just copy that pack, replace it in a legitimate ticket, and you have a legitimate ticket, a legitimate pack with all the right information, and that's it. And it's pretty undetectable. And that's Sapphire ticket. So, Sapphire ticket, it will just deep dive into the diagram here. First step, the user whose you have the active credentials, let's say Bob, for example, which is not privileged at all, asks for a TGT to the KDC. KDC says, okay, Bob, here is your TGT. That's it. And here, in the third step, in the third message here, the same user asks for S for yourself plus U to U requests to obtain a ticket to itself, but as a domain admin. And that's the neat part. What you have in return is a service ticket that Bob can decrypt, the attacker can decrypt that ticket, and inside that ticket, he will find the pack of domain administrator. You will have no password or whatever, but you will have all the right necessary information about the domain admin, like his RID, his name, his groups, his user flags, etc., etc. You will not have to forge everything from scratch. And that's where you can bypass a bit more the limitations of golden and diamond ticket, and at least detection rates. So you just in this step, in the purple step, you insert the domain admin's pack into the ticket you obtained before, and what you have is a legit ticket, a legit pack, just mixed together, and you have something that looks like a real TGT for the domain administrator. And then you just use that ticket however you wish. So the ticket is a bit better than golden and diamond ticket detection-wise, but it requires you to have the same active credentials. So if you like, for example, install a persistence on a domain and just come back 2 years later, you will probably not have those active credentials anymore. So that's something to keep in mind. But basically, the Sapphire ticket looks like a real domain admin ticket. So that's it. In order to forge that, you have to use the same command as a diamond ticket, but you have to add one thing, is the user you want to impersonate. So here I have the exact same command as the diamond ticket one, but I just added -impersonate domain admin. And here, not only the tool requested a legit TGT, but also requested S4U2Self plus U2U to obtain domain admin's pack, as I said, and then decrypt the ticket, extract the pack, put that pack into the legit ticket, and what you have is something that looks like a legit domain admin's ticket, TGT. But there's a but. This was before KB 583.80. Am I big enough for Microsoft to notice me and patch something? Hell no. But they patched something else. And this had implications to the Sapphire ticket. Unexpected ones, but I released a few things a few days ago that now make the technique work with that patch, but you'll need a few more things. But before going into that, if I describe the ticket, if I just check my forged ticket, you can see that it's targeting the service KRBTGT, so it makes this a TGT. And inside the pack, you'll find all the right information, like the logon count, user RID, group RID, group count, groups, etc., the flags, everything. And it's just legit information that I didn't have to query myself. It was just obtained through S4U2Self plus U2U. That's it. You can use the ticket however you wish, just like a golden or diamond ticket. So, there is a limitation to this. The limitation is me. I'm not a big developer. I do Python stuff because I can. Now ChatGPT allows me to do a bit more, but I'm still limited. My limit is that I couldn't overcome the limitations of Impacket. And Impacket has a limitation that says, basically, when you forge a ticket, the pack is made of multiple structures, multiple fields, if you like. So for example, here we are in one of those structures, but there are others. And if that specific structure is not supported by Impacket, it will not work. Your forged ticket will miss that structure, because you might think that we take the domain admin's pack and just put it back into the legit ticket. It doesn't work that way, not with Impacket. You take the pack, you decrypt everything, and you reconstruct everything. So if there is one structure that is not handled by Impacket, it will not work. And that's where we have the limitation with the KB whatever. KB whatever. It was one patch released for CVE 2021-42-87, which was one of the two vulnerabilities that were mixed together in order to exploit an attack called SAM account name spoofing. I will not go into the details of this attack. You will find more information online. Just type SAM account name spoofing. You will find everything you need. But what you need to keep in mind is that this patch introduced two new pack structures: the pack structure requester and attributes. Those new structures are now, after the enforcement phase of the patch for up-to-date systems, required in all TGTs. So if you face an up-to-date environment, this environment has now passed the enforcement phase, which was around October 2022. And now all the TGTs need those two structures, requester and attributes. But as I said earlier, Impacket doesn't handle all structures. I thought it did, but it didn't. And those two new structures, we had to code support for these two new structures. And those two new structures were, as far as I know, not set or required in service tickets. So if you give a TGT to the domain without those two structures, well, it's a bummer. It will not work. You will have something called KRB or TGT revoked. And if you give a service ticket without those two structures, it should work. Also, if you receive a TGT from a legit KDC, you will have those structures. If you don't, you will have if you receive a service ticket from the KDC, you will not have those structures in it. So how does it impact our technique? I'm going back to the slide here that explains the diagram. How can we obtain the domain admin's pack? We obtain the pack through S for yourself plus U2U. But this pack is in a service ticket, not a TGT. This means, from my understanding of the patch, that the service ticket does not have the two structures that would be required in a TGT. But I want to build a TGT. And that's where there is a mismatch that I need to fix, is we receive the legit pack from a service ticket, but we want to embed it in a TGT. The TGT requires those two new structures. The service ticket doesn't give us those two new structures. So we have to build them. And that's where the change happened in the code a few days ago. And I won't be able to zoom in it. No one sees, but you will have the slides available. But what it does is, basically, if you don't give the -old-pack argument, it will try to build those two new structures, because nowadays, every environment up to date requires those two new structures in the ticket. So we build them with the attributes info pack and requester info pack structures that we implemented a few months ago. A friend implemented that. And we just use those functions to build those structures so that we add those structures later on to the legit pack we received. So now the Sapphire ticket is not really a Sapphire ticket because it's like 90% Sapphire ticket, but there's 10% built thing in it. And if you fail at building the right information, you will be detected. So that's something to keep in mind. So for example, in Packet, if you don't give -user-id, by default, it will be 500. But if your domain admin, for example, has an ID of, let's say, 1114, it's not 500, you will build structures containing the 500 data, but it's not 1114, and there will be a mismatch, and you will be detected and kicked out of the network, probably. So here, basically, if you give the -user-id parameter, it will customize what ticketer builds for those two new structures. And in the command line, it just reflects like this. In order to do Sapphire ticket, you have to give the impersonated user, but you will now also need to give the target user ID in it. Without this, and if you try to attack an up-to-date environment, you'll probably be detected. So it works like this. The final ticket contains the two new structures, which are a bit short. It's one, the attributes info, and then the requester info. And in that requester info structure, there is the user SID, which contains the user ID, which is, in our case, 1114. But if you don't have those structures and you try to use the TGT, you will have the KRB AIR TGT revoked, and you will be detected. So that's the update that was made to Ticketer a few days ago. But I've not tested this thoroughly in all environments, so if you have issues in them, you can try to raise an issue. If you were wondering why I call this the Sapphire ticket, it's a gem story. You just have the list of jubilees. So I was lucky enough to have silver, gold, and diamond in order. I just picked the next one in the list. And if you find, for example, a way to build the perfect TGT without having to do anything manually, you will be able to call that a platinum ticket. Second question, how to mitigate and detect. We don't do that here. I do offense. We are in the offensive track. I don't know how to detect or prevent anything, but just to give you a few maybe things to try is if you don't give the right username to the ticket since now November 2021, it will be detected and it won't work. If you have pack fields that mismatch the user or malformed, could be detected as well, but it will not impact Sapphire ticket. It will not impact Diamond and Sapphire because it will be formatted correctly. But if there is a mismatch between, for example, your user ID and the real user ID and the one you gave into the pack, or anything else, and there is an EDR or something that tries to find those differences between the tickets that are given and the real thing, you will be detected, at least with silver, gold, and diamond. And then you can try also to detect the absence of the new structures. However, even if someone gives a TGT without those two new structures, it will not work. So you could detect it, but it won't work anywhere. So here you go. I wanted to give a few acknowledgements to the people that were behind most of the research, because I'm not the only one who researched that. So for example, Charlie Clark, Exploit PH, wrote something with Andrew Schwartz, a diamond ticket in the rough, and they explained way better than me what is a diamond ticket. And that's, by reading this, I was like, maybe there's something better to do, more improved, but this is the research behind diamond ticket. Also, there's something funny I found a few months ago when I developed the pack. I was like, okay, I know it should work, the technique should work, so now I will have to develop the tooling to do that. I developed it. It took maybe a week or two to make everything work. And once it worked, I issued the pull request on the Impact repo. And while just reading the script, I realized that there was in the to-do list of the script, written maybe in 2012, I'm not sure, Alberto Solino had already this idea and wrote it. I didn't see that, I didn't know that, but then he just explained what I did, and I just busted my ass off to understand and try to implement when it was just written in the to-do list. It was not implemented, but it was there. It was there for someone to pick up and develop it himself. So that's just a funny story. Also, thanks to Elad Shamir behind the awesome and extensive research called Wagging the Dog. If you want to know anything about Kerberos delegations, read that. But you'll have to drink 2 to 4 coffees before that, because it's very long. It is very complex to understand. Also, James Forshaw is just the real OG. He just explained how you could exploit RBCD without SPNs. He was like on Twitter, people said, oh no, you cannot do RBCD if the target service doesn't have an SPN. And he was like, are you sure about that? And he just wrote a blog post. And while reading that, I was like, but this technique can also be used to obtain a pack. And that's thanks to him that I got the idea to do the Sapphire ticket technique. And then also thanks to Pixis, which is a great friend that does things on hackanddo.com and wrote many, many great things about Kerberos and Active Directory in general. You'll have everything you need regarding sources and links here, the references behind this talk. But again, you'll have the talk, the slides at shutdown.page.link/MCTTP23 if you want. And here is the glossary, because we use always acronyms without knowing what they mean. So here it is. And the tooling behind the demonstrations that I showed, the screenshots, is mainly Python. If you want to know how to do this in Windows, I'm not the right person for this. I wrote a few stuff on the hacker recipes, but I don't do Windows. I break it, I don't use it. I game on it, but that's it. So you'll find many information here. And if your version of Impact doesn't work, you can use a fork that is a bit more active and bleeding edge. It's not as stable, but it sometimes works and gives you the technique, the argument, the code to do the Sapphire ticket technique, etc. And that's it. If you have questions, I'm all ears.
completely different.